Hello, freaks, geeks, vatniks, scrufftards, degenerates, and random weirdos online. Welcome to the Warzone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And the Russian summer offensive, I think it's, you know, begun in earnest. We're seeing Russia advancing pretty much along the entire front line. We do have some pockets of Ukrainian success here and there. But overall, we're seeing Russia advancing in multiple locations. So we're going to be taking a look at Russian advances in Sumy, in Kharkiv, Russian advances down at Tetkino, and in and around Pokrovsk. But we're actually going to start off with taking a look. I've been asked to take a look at a video made by History Legends and share my thoughts on that video. So that we're going to start. That's why this video is so goddamn long, because the first 9 minutes, I'm going to be talking about History Legends and his video, and then I'm going to go over to take a look at the front line. So I'm so sorry for this video being extremely long. Yeah, you're just gonna have to click back and forth and jump ahead, I guess, when I start rambling for too long. Anyway, like I'm doing now, let's get on with the video. Right, so the first thing we're gonna do, people have been asking, what do you think about History Legends' latest video when he's talking about the Russian advance to the east of Pokrovsk and Mirnorad, this part here. He made a video a day or two ago about Russia pushing up into this area and framing it as a massive breakthrough and what have you, stuff like that. So people ask me, what do you think about it? I didn't look at the entire thing, but at a couple of things. And yeah, the video starts off on the 15th of April. He's going through the entire process here of Russia pushing north. So it begins on the 15th, I think, of April. And, well, we're now on the 15th of April on Andrew Perpetua's map here. It does align a bit with, more or less, with Deep State and what have you. So we know that Russia's pushed up north of Soria. They're pushed up. They're outside of Yablin. They moved up to Popov Yar, south of Poltavka, and they pushed out to just east of Rodinsky. So the distances we have here is roughly 10 kilometers, right? With this being the exception here, I guess maybe that's a bit too far. Well, something like that. So this is the distances, right, that Russia has pushed. They had a breakthrough, most notably here up to Novolevnivka. This is what kind of started everything, that motorcycle assault when they came up here. That allowed them to unlock a lot of things. So they had this one big push at Novolevnivka. This is a 6 kilometer push, I think, out of Tarasivka. Poof! And that allowed them to start to unravel the Ukrainian defensive lines in the area. So, proof that it's important to breach the enemy line, come in behind, and start threatening with encirclements and attacking from behind and rear units and what have you. And that has forced the Ukrainians to gradually fall back bit by bit. And they've been doing that for 3 months, right? From the mid of April to present day, that's 3 months. So 90 days. And so the Russian advance is roughly 111 meters per day in this area. That is the massive breakthrough. 111 meters per day is what Russia has achieved here. And this is of course a collapsing front line, as it always is when Russia attacks. It's a collapsing front line. The Ukrainians are fleeing head over heels because they are fleeing on average 111 meters per day in this area. That's the massive retreat. It's propaganda, right? Did Russia have success with the push towards Novolevnivka? Yes, obviously. And they used motorcycles doing it. Did this affect the front line in the area? Yes. They broke through. They threatened the rear of the Ukrainians in this area. That meant they had to fall back, and then they could push with that momentum and force the rest of the front line to gradually fall back as well and expand and what have you. Sure thing. But it's not a collapsing front line. This is a small section of the front line that is currently falling back due to Russian pressure. And they're falling back 111 meters per day on average. That's a controlled fighting withdrawal, if anyone's wondering. Russia has some success, and the Ukrainians adapt. Right? They're not throwing away everything and running and fleeing, desperately trying to avoid being encircled and stuff like that. It's a controlled fighting withdrawal. And that is why all of this is taking so goddamn long, because the Russians never get the real actual breakthrough that forces the Ukrainians to just drop everything and run, right? So that you can advance 10 kilometers in a day, right? That is what you really want. But that is, of course, not what's happening. And by that I mean advance, not make a one push 6 kilometers and then everything kind of slowly follows. I mean, one day 10 kilometers and then a day or two later another 10 kilometers and then another 10 kilometers, right? That's not what's happening. What else did he talk? He talked about the 155th, because he's like, oh no, they're so crap. When the 155th that was trained by France, remember, complete disaster. Those guys were deployed here at Kotlina and Udachne. Those guys, the 155th, ensured that Russia could not push north of Kotlina. They were defending, counterattacking, and were actually pushing the Russians back in this area. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're located out here, according to open source intelligence. I mean, this war is so weird because they freely post shit on Facebook and Instagram. So if someone with half a brain just takes a look, what's that in the background? Then you realize, oh, they're over here, they're over here. It's just OPSEC is out the window. It does not exist in this war. Really weird. So the 155th that apparently stopped the Russian advance outright at Kotlina. And I do believe they are over here at the moment. But they're in the area. And they have inflicted a lot of casualties on the Russians. Pretty impressive for being, half the original size and being crap, according to the Vatniks. So if this crap unit is inflicting so much damage and can stop the Russians from advancing, what does that tell you about the Russians? Oh, don't think about it too hard. You might actually figure something out. But yeah, that's I think it was at some point he said, oh, hang on, you have to keep up now because things are moving fast, when it was describing the events taking place here. So the Vatniks, they're like, okay, I'm holding on, things are going extremely fast, what's happening? I can barely keep up. They can barely keep up with an advance that is moving 111 meters per day. That's that sure is something. Right, so enough of that bullshit. Andrew Perpetua's map, we're going to be jumping back and forth between his and Mayakovsk 73. We're starting off with Tetkino and Sumio Blast. Interesting, this is interesting. We've been talking about this factory here for a bit, and I've been been mentioning, son of a, that Ukraine has been bombing this part of town and leaving this factory alone, indicating that Ukraine might have moved up troops and pushed Russians back. But look at this. Airstrikes, Ukrainian airstrikes in the factory. And in this part of the factory, this is a bit concerning. Because, I mean, you can see this wide open field. And the only access way the Ukrainians have is through these woods. So if the Russians have managed, I mean, it kind of looks as if they've pushed down this way and reached these buildings. This bridge has been blown up forever, by the way. Suggests that Russians have pushed in. They now control the access way, or maybe they all died, I don't know, but they did control the access way for Ukraine to move through the woods and into the factory. So now the Russians appears to have moved through here and cut the factory off. If we have Ukrainians in the factory, that is a problem. If the Russians have indeed secured this part of the area, that's an important push by the Russians if that is the case. We saw Ukrainian drones striking Russian positions down here a couple of days ago. Nothing else on, showing us anything about that. So a bit unclear. Did the Russians come this way, or did they push through this way, or come through here? How did Russians reach this position? We just don't know. Does Mayakovsk say anything? No, yes, confirms the airstrikes in the area. He has the factory as under Russian control. And you have some more Ukrainian airstrikes up here at Zaria, and here we can see that the Russians are contesting the border regions at Basalivka. The mappers have Russia further in. ISW and Andrew have Russia further in Basalivka, contesting the entire town. Sumio Blast, more territory given to Ukraine by Andrew. It's this part here. Russia has been sending drones to this area of the windbreak, so it's not like Ukraine is not in control of the wide open spaces here. They're in control of territory that where you can hide, and that would be down here. Russia is launching drones all over the place. Might indicate that Ukraine has had further success in the area. Mayakovsk 73, though, still has parts of Kindrativka as Russian. Seems reasonable, judging by reports from Russian mill bloggers, and also where Russian strikes are happening. They're not happening down here, they're happening up here, indicating that this part of town might actually be still under Russian control. What else? You have a Russian push between Yunakivka and Yablin. We move back a day or two, take a look. You also have a Russian airstrike along this valley, and some push here and here. So Russia is applying pressure again. For several weeks, Russia couldn't move. They were stuck. They couldn't push out. But now momentum has shifted. And we'll see if this is part of a larger effort from the Russians in the area, if they can't push on. Because like I said, for the longest of time, they haven't been able to move at all, and Ukraine has been counterattacking, liberating Kindrativka, Andrivka, applying pressure to Oleksivka. and holding the line in Yunakivka along this main road here. But now it seems as if the Russians have built up some momentum and they are pushing. And yeah, it's this windbreak here that they seem to have secured. It's not that massive. I mean, yeah, if you can add in the contested area, it is definitely a larger push. But this is where Ukraine pushed up with tanks, remember? Some weeks ago and opened fire straight north. Essentially what has happened is that Russia has pushed out and secured the windbreak here. So yeah, when you look at the map like this and going back and forth, does look a bit dramatic, but essentially what Russia has done is secured this windbreak here after Ukraine was operating in this area. So they have pushed in south of Yablin and secured the road between Yablin and Yunakivka, more or less. Russia is shelling over here. Here you can see more blue from Andrew as Ukraine is pushing out. Kucherov seems to be under a bit of pressure as Ukraine is applying or attempting to push in. Let's see if we can move back. Yeah, you can see here Russian artillery shelling all over. This forest here is a Ukrainian stronghold, as is this valley, and they're sneaking into Russia via with the help of cover here and causing trouble for the Russians. That would be Tatkino and Sumio, I think. Now we're going to move down this to things are happening at Vovchansk of all places. Take a look at this. Here you have a Russian advance. They're crossing the river west of Vovchansk, and they are in these woods. And you see this on Mayakovsk 73's map as well. Right here, crossing the river, pushing into the woods up to this forest road. Seems to be what people agree on. A Ukrainian drone strike all the way down here. That should indicate that Russia has pushed even further and that the contested area might... well, it is contested. Let's see if we see... Yeah, take a look. Ukrainian drone strikes down here and over here. So quite clearly... and over here as well. This is major. When we talked about this when the Kharkiv offensive began, I homed in on this crossing point, thinking Russia would make a stronger push across it to try and reach the woods. But I also pointed out, Ukrainians have a lot of good defensive positions to defend that point. But now they have managed to get across. I wonder if they did use this in the end after all. And, well, as you can see here, this is on the 16th. I haven't really been updating as I should have been the last couple of days. But it's summer. It's hot as hell. Give me a break. So here you can see the Russians are shelling. Ukrainian drones are hunting down Russians. This can actually affect the Vovchansk front line, as you might imagine. If the Russians can come into town and avoid having to try and push across the river, securing crossing points, building up forces in the woods, moving south through cover to unlock each of these smaller towns and villages. If they can establish a presence in this factory, it becomes a fortress. It's going to be difficult for Ukraine to push them out. This could be extremely significant if the Russians have manpower to exploit this push, and if they can come down, say, down here to this road here, because then Ukraine has very few options in supporting their troops in Vovchansk. And could it be because of this? I mean, remember, I did talk about this, didn't I? The other day when we were talking about the Russian push here, how that could affect the rest of the front line, and that Ukraine more than likely would be moving troops from Kupansk and Vovchansk to deal with this, because if they didn't do it, then the Russians might come up behind Vovchansk or come down behind Kupansk and cause a lot of trouble and shenanigans. So if the Ukrainians did not reinforce, the Russians could push through and affect the front line at Vovchansk and down at Kupiansk. And if the Ukrainians reinforced, that also would more than likely affect Kupiansk and Vovchansk, and that might be what we're seeing. Right? So maybe Ukraine moved troops to contain this push, and that weakened the Ukrainian positions at Vovchansk, and that allowed the Russians to push across and establish a presence. And this is an important push. It's not a big push. Let's see here. It's not that big at all. As you can see, 1.5 kilometers, but we're talking about 111 meters here and there and stuff like that, right? But this is roughly a mile for American viewers. This is an actual important push that can affect the entirety of Vovchansk, and if they can keep pushing, force Ukrainians back, gather troops on the southern side of the river, and keep advancing and force Ukraine out of Vovchansk, all of a sudden they can begin maneuvers to push from Vovchansk towards Prikolotorno, and the Russians can move from this pocket and try and link up. That brief short push, 1.5 kilometers, a mile, together with this small incursion, could potentially have huge impact on the frontline situation up here in this area, this pocket between Kupiansk a bit south and Vovchansk. So this is definitely worth keeping an eye on. I'm afraid that we will see more of this situation in the news in the coming days. Things will more than likely heat up in Vovchansk, is what I'm afraid of, to be perfectly honest. God damn again. Stuff down my throat. That's nasty. But over at Kupiansk, not much is happening. So the Russians have tried to push in north. We know the Ukraine is operating here. Russia has been directing artillery at Kindrashivka, so that kind of does suggest that Ukraine might be in control of the town once more. Going south, this push here, Russia had some momentum. They made some pushes around Selen High, and another Selen High? Hang on, Selen High. Yeah, take a look. Jeez, I mean, dude, there's like 100 names for towns and villages in Ukraine, and they use those 100 names for every goddamn town. It's just, working the postal office must be a bitch. Anyway, so this is where Russia had some success a week or so ago, if not more, but it seems to have stabilized. You can see here Russian drone strike within the contested area, so Ukraine is still operating here, holding the line. Massive Russian artillery strikes, shelling aimed at this small pocket. Russia has made a push here. If we move back, you can see here a motorcycle assault that allowed Russians to push up, took the Ukrainians by surprise, and now they're bombarding the center here, trying to close this pocket, no doubt, in the next couple of days. This push has... Son of a... There's something in my throat. stalled a bit. Russia was advancing steadily for quite some time, but now not that much has been going on for the past couple of weeks. So we might be seeing, that Russia did have some success. They were breaking through. The Ukrainians were trying to adapt. The Ukrainians were setting up proper defensive lines further behind that they could fall back to, and now Russia's reached those prepared defensive lines, and now they're struggling to push past those. So that's kind of how it works with a breakthrough. Or even on the smaller scale breakthroughs. That is, if you have the Ukrainian lines and Russia managed to push through, it's difficult to deal with the breakthrough as it happens. So what you need to do is to try and fight it, try and contain it, and then you prepare defenses a bit further back, so you fall back. So while you're trying to contain the breach, you also prepare lines a bit further back where the real defense will take place. And in this case, it does appear as if it's along this line here. So the Russians had a breach, and wrong color as always, and they started expanding, pushing. The Ukrainians tried to control it, but the Russians had momentum. They kept pushing, and eventually they reached the line where the Ukrainians had proper defenses in place. It's kind of like with Kursk, right? Ukraine entered into Kursk. Russia couldn't contain it. They had to move in forces to contain it. A bit behind, some distance into Kursk. And when eventually Ukraine reached those prepared defensive lines, away from the breach point, away from the point of contact, then the incursion came to a stop. So it's kind of the same. So what the Russians need to do now is try and repeat this. They need another breakthrough and then push. Ukraine has to adapt and prepare defensive lines a bit behind so that they eventually can contain the breach, or the breakthrough, I should say. That is why it's so weird to me when things like this happen, and you see other YouTubers, Vatniks and pro-Ukrainians alike, they're like, oh, it's such a narrow breakthrough. All they have to do is attack here in a pincer move, and everything is hunky-dory. We saw it multiple times in Kursk. We saw it when the Russians were pushing for Ocheretino after Avdiivka. When they pushed up towards Ocheretino, pro-Ukrainians were like, oh, all you have to do is a pincer move, and the Russians are trapped. Not how this shit works, one bit. If a breach happens, you have to adjust, you fall back, you prepare a proper defensive line somewhere well behind the breach, and you just try and slow it down until the enemy pushes out and reaches the proper defensive line, and then they're stuck. So that's how this shit works. Pincer moves, no. A pincer move is something you kind of need to build up to. You have to build up your own forces and then launch a pincer move to come in behind the Russians in this case, and what have you. So anyway, moving on. Russia's struggling here, can't really advance at all. Some Ukrainian counterattacks. Russia has made some gains here north of Chasiv, but I mean they're still stuck in Chasiv. You want to talk Russian advance? When was Bakhmut? Bakhmut to 17 kilometers. And the Vatniks, why did you take it from here? Based on the initial assault against Bakhmut back in 2023. Toretsk, it's so goddamn hot, I can't think. Russia is beginning to move out of Toretsk here at the Dulivka. These Ukrainian names, Dulivka, let's remove Russian attack direction. Dulivka. How do you know which of these towns you're supposed to deliver mail to? It's just insanity. But Dylivka and Dylivka, this is where Russia has had some advance, pushing out along this valley here. They're still struggling with this mining facility. The castle on the hill. This is a hill with a mining facility on top of it, and the Russians, they are struggling to move past it. Absolutely struggling. This area has been a hellhole for the Russians. They can't push out of Toretsk, which is why the push at Yablonivka here is so important. If they can reach the lakes and the dams here, that should force the Ukrainians in this area to potentially fall back, and that could unlock Toretsk for the Russians so that they can move up towards Nelipivka at least. Yablonivka is a massive obstacle because the Ukrainians are in control of the high ground here, overlooking the approach to Yablonivka, overlooking the streets down here in the valley. The Russians have tried to make mechanized assaults along this road here to outflank the Ukrainian trenches up on the high ground, but it's slow going, and the Russians have more than likely taking a lot of casualties trying to push in here. But of late, we can see that they have had, some, some success. You can see here, this is on the 10th. So the past 10 days, we can see that the contested area is growing. You can see they're attempting a motorcycle assault, expanding contested area. Nothing about confirmed Russian control. Russian shell. This is interesting. Okay, so we have Ukrainians here. So what's happening here is that Russia is pushing out. We have Russian shelling here, and that shelling is probably suppressing Ukrainians in this part of town, and the Russians then launched this assault along the main street of the village here. They're also probably moving in troops to secure the buildings after the shelling, but suppressing Ukrainians and then going like crazy with the motorbikes past the Ukrainian positions to come in behind them and try and secure positions deep in the village. And then, of course, the next step is try and reach this forward element that is set up in these buildings over here somewhere. But as you can see, they came in behind, and now they can on the 17th begin to contest Yablonivka itself. But this is tough going for the Russians. This has been a very well defended town, Yablonivka, with the Ukrainians holding the high ground. And so here we are where let's see if I've forgotten Mayakovsky 73 if he has anything to add. Not much up here. Not really. No, same thing of what we've been talking about, right? Here you have the mining facility on the hill, that castle on the hill that Russia is struggling with. They're trying to move up to it, but they can't get past it. The push through Yablonivka. And we're now, this is where we're at. Russia managed to get across the river at Razine on, this is the 12th, 13th, so, and then 14th. So for a week now, we've seen the Russians being stuck here. Not so strange, it's a river, they have few options to get in across more than likely. Ukraine is probably sending in every drone they have, and if they're in Razine, Russia can really only, as you can see, move out this way, maybe try and cross the fields here. It's not easy for the Russians to push out from Razine. Did look like we had a lot of artillery strikes here at Mykolaiivka. Russia's massive Russian assault against Mykolaiivka. Where does the river flow? They're pushing up to the river. They haven't made it across. So they're pushing in to reach the river essentially. There are some creeks. Yeah, this is where the river is. So Mykolaiivka. Okay, so pushing in here, massive Russian assault on this small village outside of Novo Economica. So will they secure this bridge, or is it blown? We'll have to wait and see. Of this is, and here you have Russian BTRs. They're pushing up this pocket. It's gonna fall. Why is Ukraine holding on to this pocket? Makes no sense. This surely must be under Russian control by now. When they made this push Russia, I mean, Ukraine must have left this pocket altogether. We'll see if they can push up the river here and secure Mykolaiivka. It certainly looks like it with that big. Take a look at this assault. Jesus Christ. Main assault in the middle. Flanks secured by Russian shelling. This is where the roads come in. You can see here, road and road. So the Russians are shelling the access ways where Ukraine can support Mykolaiivka, and then they're assaulting in the center, coming down this way more than likely, and fanning out into the village. So you can kind of see how the Russians plan the assault here. And of course, drone strikes within Nova Economica to slow down the Ukrainians as they're trying to move in reinforcements, maybe even hitting mortars positions and what have you. So this is an interesting look at combined arms from the Russian perspective, with artillery isolating Mykolaiivka, drones hunting down support units, and then the actual assault coming in and fanning out with drones supporting the assault. So modern warfare in this one image here. Interesting. So yeah, but Razine, this, we're gonna take a look at the situation here in a moment. Pashana has fallen. Russia made some pushes the other day on the 16th. You can see they reclaimed Pashana. I was a bit worried that they would continue pushing into Svirova, but that doesn't seem to happen. This forest here is more than likely basically one massive trench line system, and the Russians are struggling pushing past it, would be my guess. Udashny Kotlin is holding, and so is this part. We're gonna take a look at this as well a bit more in detail. This is also a location where the Russians have, in a month and a half, they've pushed 20 kilometers, which is kind of impressive for this war. Selen High, and so they kind of started out here a month and a half ago outside of Bahatyr. 2 months ago, 2.5, even if we add Bahatyr, because they had trouble pushing past Bahatyr. But once they did get past, they moved up along the river, came up along the river here through Komar, and threatened to encircle a pocket of Ukrainians. Ukrainians fell back, and the Russians could push up all the way to the river, and now they're trying to push across. So that encirclement gave Russia a lot of momentum, but once the encirclement was over, things have slowed down, and they're struggling with pushing across the river here. But in this area, the advance has been 400 meters per day, I think. I mean, if they're advancing, yes, it puts a bit more pressure on the Ukrainian commanders, but 400 meters per day, you still you still have time to see what's happening when the enemy is moving 400 meters per day. That still gives you time to readjust troops behind the line, moving in troops where as needed, reinforce and what have you, because the enemy is not advancing fast enough. They make some dashes here and there, and then you have a couple of days to adjust, and then there's a small adjustment somewhere, and then you have a couple more days to adjust before something else happens. And that is why this is moving so slow for the Russians. They're advancing too slow, which gives the Ukrainian times to adapt to the changes on the battlefield. Yeah, just to highlight, because it pisses the Vatniks off. Avdiivka to way over here. This has taken Russia 2 years to achieve. September of 2023 to now, essentially, say September of 2025. 60 kilometers. That is an advance. Remember that it was an advance of 111 here, meters per day. The advance here is 82 meters per day for the past 2 years. And when they broke out of Avdiivka, remember, it was a collapsing front line. Ukrainian lines were crumbling, collapsing. Moving back 80 meters per day is not a collapsing front line. And now they're pushing up here, and it's a collapsing front line. You're pushing them back 100 meters per day. That is not a collapsing front line. And here, absolutely, they have some more success. Things are speeding up 400 meters per day, but then not much else is happening. Because they're, I just explained how these things work. So you try and contain it. You prepare defenses a bit behind the breakthrough, and then you contain it. So, not a collapsing front line. It just isn't. It's Russian propaganda. It's bullshit. Moving 80 meters per day is not a collapsing front line. That everyone should be able to grasp this simple logic. So we're gonna take a look at the advance here and the advance here, because I think we might actually see what allowed these advances to take place. And I just realized this video is gonna be extremely long. Oh, I'm just rambling here in this goddamn, it's like 30 degrees outside or something, and I'm melting away. Where are we at that moment? 40 minutes? Jesus, so sorry. Anyway, where are we at? Here we go. Pokrovsk is over here. And this is the front lines here are not updated. It's an old map, but it shows us Ukrainian defensive lines. And you can see here where Russia has been advancing. Take a look. Where has Russia been advancing? Struggling to advance. Remember, it's been taking months for Russia to advance here. Here, right? This is where they're moving up towards Yablonivka. This is the high ground here that they're struggling with. The lake and what have you. Take a look. All the yellow is massive Ukrainian fortifications, really prepared, good prepared defenses. Where has Russia advanced? We know they're struggling over here. Quite clear, we understand why they're struggling at Toretsk, right? Lots and lots and lots of yellow stuff. But this, Yablonivka, hardly any defenses at all. This is where Russia is advancing currently. So they're filling this void where you have very few defensive lines. So they pushed up here and ran out of steam for whatever reason, and they're now pushing into the area where you have not all that many defensive lines. Same thing here, when they're pushing up to the river, they push through here where you have very few defensive lines, and when they're crossing the river, they're crossing here into another open spaces. Isn't that interesting? So they've been stuck here for months and months and months, and then they did have a breakthrough with motorcycles and managed to, get past some of these defensive lines. And now you can clearly see here how they're advancing, where Ukraine has very few proper defenses. They made it past this defensive line here, absolutely. Very crucial for the Russians. They came in here and they came in behind all of this and are now occupying the empty spaces behind the Ukrainian defenses here. So the question is, Rudinsky, I think this is Rudinsky. Can they push through Rudinsky, or will they just flow in and occupy the empty spaces here? Interesting. And this is also down here is where they had the 20-kilometer push in a month and a half. This is Bahatyr, and then they pushed up along the river, open spaces. They also had some success down here, and that forced the Ukrainians to abandon this pocket. So they pushed up this way, and I think they're now trying to push out here. Or no, it's here, isn't it? Yeah, anyway, you can see here that they're following territory where Ukraine has very few defenses in place. And that might be worry some people. I'm just curious, Ukraine has left these wide open spaces undefended, or they haven't built as many defensive positions here for some reason. And I wonder why. It clearly is an intentional choice by the Ukrainians to leave these gaps. Why is that? Why are they leaving these gaps? Is it because they, expect the Russians to move through these areas, and this is where you have minefields and pre-sighted terrain for, or pre-sighted targets for artillery? So the Russians are moving through massive minefields and are getting hammered by drones and artillery as they're advancing, causing massive amounts of casualties. Is that it? It's fascinating. We can clearly see that Russia is advancing where Ukraine has very few defensive lines in place, which is not unsurprising. But that means they're moving along very predictable paths. If they're coming in this way and then flowing north. If they're coming up this way and then trying to occupy this pocket. Or has Ukraine fucked up and haven't built proper defensive lines in the area and Russia is exploiting them? Oh, this is a long one. 45 minutes. If you're wondering why I'm using this map, I'm breaching OPSEC, I'm telling the Russians everything. This map has been online forever. I have no clue if it's accurate or not. And if a civilian managed to gather all of this information and then provide it online via, relying on satellite images, because this has been a thing since the start of the war. Civilians paying for satellite imagery and then they're mapping out defensive lines. It was done back in 2022, 2023. It's been a thing forever in this war. So if civilians can do this using satellites to map out defensive lines, I'm pretty sure the Russians have that capacity and capability as well. But yeah, it does appear as if the Russians are following these open spaces to advance. Question is this because Ukraine allows it? They expect it to happen. They have left these gaps intentionally to lure Russians into kill zones and kill boxes? Or is Russia exploiting gaps in the Ukrainian defensive lines? And that's all I have for you. I hope you found it interesting. I hope I'll see you in the next one. As always, Kupansk, Ukraine, and give them hell.